Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to university, or as it's known in America, college. And you might be thinking, Lawrence, it must have been a long time ago since you were at university. Why didn't you make this video when you were still in your early 20s? And my answer to that is simple. YouTube didn't exist yet. And the other reason that it's taken me this long is that I am incredibly lazy, just like I was when I was a student. And when I was a student, I attended Lancaster University on the west coast of England. And I didn't know it yet, but it was there that two things happened that would prove very relevant to this video. Number one, I developed a pretty robust understanding of the sort of general university life in England. And number two, long-time subscribers will know that it was at university that I met my now American wife. And if you yourself are not yet subscribed to this channel, do that now. In the meantime, I'm going to turn into an American college bro with a British accent and talk about all of the ways that British and American colleges are very different. We cannot talk about this topic without first talking about some of the ways that university terms differ on either side of the pond. As I've already pointed out, institutions of higher education are usually known as university in the UK and college in America. That said, individual American colleges like, say, Harvard or Yale do contain the word university, and the reverse is sometimes true in Britain, as evidenced by the likes of Imperial College London. But those two terms get even more confusing when you consider the fact that firstly, in Britain, college is where we do our sixth form education between the ages of 16 and 18, but it doesn't end there, because Americans, what do you call the place on campus where students reside? This is usually known as dorms, short for dormitories. And in Britain, that word is usually reserved for things like boarding school, where you've got like a number of people in one room. In a university context, we might refer to that as halls of residence, or this is where it gets confusing, college. For instance, my dorm room was in Grisdale College within Lancaster University, which had several other colleges. We'll get onto those in a bit. In both countries, an academic year is broken up into sections, and those sections in this country, as in the United States, are known as semesters. However, in Britain, the term for this is term. And to this day, I often hear Americans talk about majoring in a subject. That's a term you don't really hear in the UK. Like Americans, one of our alternative terms might be to study a subject or to do a subject. I did English. Or, and this one's slightly more archaic these days, I read English. And finally, while British people use the word brilliant to mean something is amazing, Americans might apply it to a student who is particularly gifted. And as it happens, both definitions can be applied to users of today's sponsor, which also bears the name Brilliant. Brilliant is a learning platform with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and artificial intelligence. Its main focus is to be uniquely effective, and what I really like about that is that Brilliant emphasizes not just what we learn, but the methods by which we learn. For instance, my first lesson involved a series of problem-solving conundrums with sad robots, instantly appealing to my love of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which coincidentally I first read at university, but not in the same way that I read English. But it also tested me with a science that I've lacked for some time. Logic. Furthermore, Brilliant sharpens your ability to think critically, which is a far more meaningful investment than memorizing facts only to forget them once the test is done. As a bona fide YouTube sensation, one skill set that's very important to me is the ability to evaluate YouTube data in an increasingly algorithmic world. Well, Brilliant just rolled out lots of new data-related lessons, all of which are perfect not just for content creators like me, but people with real jobs and interests. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/lostinthepond. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. The link is in my description below. For me, it's been almost a quarter of a century, but I can just about remember the application process for selecting the university that I wanted to go to. This was done through a body called UCAS, and through UCAS you apply to 5 universities in the subject that you want to study. So in my case that was English language, and I applied to Wolverhampton, Edgehill, Sheffield, York and Lancaster. York rejected me even though I got the grades they wanted, and Lancaster accepted me, so I know who I would side with in the War of the Roses. In the US, this application process is slightly different. I was talking to my wife about it this morning, and she said that you could apply to as many colleges as you want. The only thing with that is there is a fee attached, which seems to vary from university to university. I should note that this is also true in the UK. I didn't remember that part because my parents probably paid for it. But the point is, if you are really loaded, I suppose you improve your chances of getting approved. But the other thing that she said to me that I don't think I knew until researching this video was that you don't necessarily have to determine there and then what it is you want to study. Now, this will depend on the college, but at some, it turns out, you can just say, I haven't decided yet, or I'm undecided. And I'll wing it. I'll figure it out as the year progresses, which brings us on quite neatly to this. That's right, the academic portion of university. The academic side of things is vastly different from one country to the other. Firstly, there's the timeline. I finished and started my undergraduate degree in 3 years. And that's not because I'm some sort of gifted child, although Mum, if you want to confirm in the comments. It's also because that's just the norm for most non-scientific degrees in the UK. But from those American friends or girlfriends of young dashing Lawrence, I discovered that the norm in America is 4 years. And at first I couldn't wrap my head around why it took an extra year just to learn shit. And I suppose it's because in America, during that first year particularly, they take other classes, often general studies, that have nothing to do with the major. In fact, that major could and often does change. In fact, according to most estimates, at least a third of US students change their major at least once. In the UK, there is less flexibility around this because, well, our choice of major is declared during the application phase and plays a big part in the university's decision to accept us. In Britain, for all 3 years, you focus on your major and maybe some minors as well. For example, I did linguistics and creative writing. And my grades looked a lot different to those of my wife, and not just because she tried harder. You see, while an A grade, or a first, is anything above 70% in the UK, American undergraduates must achieve 90% or above to attain the same grade. At the other end of the spectrum, anything below 60% will earn you a fail in the US, while British students can still pass with a score as low as 40. And you might be thinking, ooh, Lawrence, does this mean that grades are earned differently in each country? And the answer to that is yes. While the final grade for a US undergraduate hangs on their grade point average, or GPA, the fate of British undergraduates is determined by their performance in end-of-year exams as well as their dissertation. I'm also under the impression that in the UK we have more lectures than American students might be used to, which is why I slept through half of my degree. That said, it's not the only reason. That's right, the other reason that I found myself waking up at 2 p.m. was campus culture. That is, all of the things that embody the social aspects of university life. In Britain, these centre around a couple of things, one of which is drinking. Now, bear in mind that in the UK, the legal drinking age is 18. So when you get to university, even in your first week, which is known as Freshers' Week, you not only get absolutely bladdered if you are the sort of person that drinks alcohol, but it's encouraged by the student union, because everyone does it. It's legal, there's no problem. This I found to not be true in America, where of course students drink, but remember that half the students, the younger half, are underage, and under those circumstances it's sort of hard to market your on-campus events and things like that as an opportunity to get drunk. Now that might be a good thing, because I remember during my own Freshers' Week I got absolutely rat-arsed every night, and when I was at university, drinking seemed to fuel a lot of the inter-college rivalries. Like the Grisdale College people really didn't like the Pendle College people. And so if one person drank enough tequila and the wind blew in a weird direction, another person might have their trousers pulled down just because they happen to belong to different accommodation. Now, thankfully, you don't encounter that specific issue in the US very much, but I could be wrong because I never attended an American university, but there does seem to be a little bit of a rivalry that emerges between these Greek sororities and or fraternities. And students that belong to these will talk about Greek Life, which is not a magazine about Athens, but it's sort of a collective term for all of these sororities and fraternities because their names all contain Greek letters. And this concept was all Greek to me because in Britain we don't have this. But these groups in US colleges get together and sort of talk about leadership skills and academia and other stuff that I've never yet been privy to because I've never attended one of these things. I just imagine that these are sort of future world leaders plotting to take over the world by turning everybody into a mouse. I'm sure it's not quite as sinister as that, and I understand that members of these organisations are members for life. So it makes me wonder, do members meet up when they're like 60 years old and have a reunion? Or do you just do it for the first few years after graduation and then eventually lose touch, like I did with all of my friends? When I was at university in England, there were two ways that you could tell who was an American student. Number one, how they pronounced everything. And number two, they liked to wear sweaters and or hoodies denoting the university from whence they came. And I think this is a big difference between British and American students. It's not that we can't buy regalia pointing out our university. It's just that it's not such a big deal to us. And it's not a case that Americans happen to be part of alumni programs like my wife is and that the British somehow aren't, because we are. I get these magazines, or at least I used to until they started making me feel old. It's that America puts much more of a national focus on university sports teams than we do in Britain. So if there's a major event on, like the college basketball tournament that happens every March, people who graduated from the university that happened to make it to the final and sportsed harder than the other team get to cheer for that. We don't have anything equivalent to that in the UK except the Cambridge versus Oxford rowing. And most of us didn't go to Cambridge or Oxford, and most of us don't know how to row. So we have no real need to maintain this strong affiliation with our university once we leave. And so in conclusion to a video into which I put more effort than most of my university essays, I would say that that tells you a lot about how bad those essays were. If you've been to college and or university in Britain and or America, let me know in the comments below and tell me about some of the differences you noticed. In the meantime, I've now lived in the US for nearly 16 years, and so here are 6 American things that I can no longer live without. You'll watch that video next. Until the next time, goodbye.